Surely you've heard the stories of rigged elections, rigged matches, referees being paid off, but not many scandals can match the 2002 World Cup. To put it bluntly, South Korea had spent decades as the underdog of the tournament. Other nations practically lined up to play them, knowing they'd walk away with an easy win. But one year, South Korea decided enough was enough. It was time to win, no matter the cost. So what did they do? They went big. They hired Gus Hiddink, one of the best coaches around, and they allegedly infiltrated FIFA, grabbed the World Cup hosting rights, and there are rumors that they paid off any referees they could get their hands on. After spending billions of dollars, South Korea became a force to be reckoned, leaving us with one of football's greatest mysteries, a nation that supposedly bought their way to the top. But even after all that, they lost the title. And then there's Byron Moreno, a referee who made calls so controversial that his name became synonymous with the scandal. As if that wasn't enough, he later got involved in drug dealing, a twist almost too wild to believe. So, quick recap. The roots of Korea's football obsession run deep. When British sailors first brought the game to Korea, the locals were hooked, watching in awe as the Brits yelled and kicked the ball around like madmen. But by the time the World Cup started, Korea wasn't even an independent country anymore. They were under Japanese rule for years. Korean fans had no choice but to root for Japan, which, as you can imagine, didn't sit well. When World War II ended, though, things changed. After the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, Korea slipped out the back door, becoming its own country once again. And just a few years later, they were ready to fight for a spot in the World Cup. The twist? To qualify, they had to beat Japan. One match, winner goes to the World Cup. What followed was an absolute demolition, a 7-3 thrashing on aggregate. South Korea had become the first fully independent Asian country to make it to the World Cup, a groundbreaking achievement. But 180 minutes later, they were out with 0 goals scored, a whopping 15 conceded, and only about 3,000 fans in the stands. Just to put that into perspective, 60,000 people turned out that same day to watch West Germany take on Hungary. But South Korea bounced back 32 years later, 1986, making it to the World Cup once again. Unfortunately, their first match was against Diego Maradona, and let's just say it didn't go well. Still, they kept fighting, but they couldn't pull off a single win. Fast forward 12 more years, 1998. And this time, South Korea was done with being the nice guys. They easily steamrolled everyone in the qualification round, but 2 games into the World Cup, they had already given up 8 goals. They didn't even wait for the group stage to end. They just fired their manager on the spot. And with that, the plotting began. They decided to bring in Gus Hiddink, who had recently led the Netherlands to a brutal 5-0 victory over them. South Korea was ready to win, no matter how dirty they had to play. But first things first, if you're going to rig a World Cup, you might as well do it on home turf, right? So, in a move straight out of a Hollywood script, South Korea teamed up with Japan, yes, Japan, their old rivals, to bid for the World Cup. This was huge back then. Not only had the tournament never been hosted in Asia, but nobody had ever applied to co-host it either. People had their doubts. Some thought it was absurd to host the tournament in 2 countries, especially with a sea dividing them, while others were skeptical about Japan's involvement, as they hadn't even qualified before. Then there were time zone issues, as European viewers would have to watch the game in the morning. And of course, many doubted there were enough football fans in both countries to fill the stadiums. Still, against all odds, South Korea and Japan's bid won. There weren't many competitors that year. Mexico was really their only competition. To make it even more interesting, FIFA decided on the hosts by acclamation, meaning whoever made the loudest noise got it. No ballots involved. Not suspicious at all, right? Well, it gets better. The FIFA vice president at that time was also the president of the Korean Football Association. Draw your own conclusions on that one. And so the World Cup came to South Korea and Japan after a cool $4.7 billion went into prepping for it. They shocked everyone with their enthusiasm and support, but the real drama was just beginning. With Gus Hiddink at the helm, South Korea started strong, taking down Poland 2-0 in their first match. Impressive, but nothing to raise eyebrows over, yet. And as the tournament rolled on, things were only just heating up. The next game against the United States ended in a 1-1 draw. Plenty of fouls, with players hitting the turf left and right, but mysteriously no clear replays. No one seemed to mind. South Korea now had 4 points. A win in their next match could take them to the knockout rounds. But the team in their way, Portugal, and this was no pushover squad. They had Rui Costa, Luis Figo in his prime, and an emerging golden generation. They needed that win just as much. The odds were heavily against Korea. Then things got wild. 2 red cards for Portugal and a 21-year-old Ji-sung Park slid in the game's only goal. Yes, the fouls were real and the rough play came from both sides. Statistically, Korea even edged Portugal out in fouls with 21 to their 19. Yet somehow, Portugal got the worse end of the deal, no question. Strange match, sure. But things took a turn so dramatic in the round of 16 clash against Italy. But before that, I got to introduce to you Byron Moreno, an Ecuadorian referee handpicked by FIFA. He'd been officiating since 1996 and was notorious in his country for dabbling in shady politics and even shadier officiating. He once extended a match by 13 minutes, which just so happened to allow a team to stage a 2-goal comeback, all in injury time. Make of that what you will. Anyway, Moreno was set to officiate South Korea's game against Italy, and let's just say he seemed a bit biased. 5 minutes in, he was already pointing to the penalty spot. Oddly, there was no good replay angle on the foul, but judging by the Italians' faces, it didn't look straightforward. Buffon guessed right, saving the penalty. But after that, all bets were off. South Korea went hard after Italy, playing one of the most physical matches in World Cup history. Tomasi was tripped while through on goal, no call. A South Korean elbowed Del Piero in the face. On any other day, a red card, easy. But that night, nothing. Maldini gets kicked in the head. Not even a warning. Players were on the field bleeding, but Moreno didn't seem to mind. By the 90-minute mark, it was all square at 1-1, which in 2002 meant a golden goal would decide the match. And that's when Moreno cranked it up. Totti went into the box, took on a defender, and clearly got tripped. Moreno blew the whistle and, surprisingly, awarded a free kick to Korea, claiming Totti had dived. Not only that, he handed Totti a second yellow and sent him off. Unreal, especially considering Moreno was 40 yards away when Totti supposedly dived. And then came Tomasi's moment. He dribbled past the keeper, ready to score, and heard a whistle. You probably guessed it, he was offside. Korea scored a golden goal, and it was game over. That was it for Italy. The Italians were beyond furious. Forget the players in the heat of the moment. The backlash at home was off the charts. Italian Minister Franco Frattini called the match a scandalous disgrace, accusing officials of plotting Italy's exit. He said, "Korea is powerful. It's obvious they've pulled some strings. That referee was a joke." And, to top it all off, the scorer of that golden goal, Ahn Jung-hwan, was playing for Perugia in Italy. Ironically, he'd scored more in the World Cup than he had all season for them. So, Perugia fired him on the spot, saying, "He'll never set foot here again. He only decided to play like a star when it was against Italy, a country that welcomed him with open arms." I mean, come on, he's a striker. Did they expect him to avoid scoring? If anything, Perugia should have been thrilled that their player was in such great form. So after dispatching Italy's legendary players, Del Piero, Maldini, Totti, and a bunch of other giants, it was time for South Korea to take on Spain. And Spain's squad was no joke either. They had football titans like Hierro, Puyol, Morientes and a young Xavi. But somehow they stood no chance. The match quickly turned from football to what felt more like a boxing ring. Elbows flying, dubious offside calls on every promising pass, and somehow Spain's clean goal got disallowed. Apparently, there was a foul every time, though oddly no one saw it except the referee, Gamal Al-Gandour. Luis Enrique had a clear shot breaking through to the keeper. Flag goes up, offside. Extra time comes, and as Spain's looking for that golden goal, Morientes nearly scores from a cross, but the linesman claims the ball went out of bounds. It hadn't. The game rolled into penalties, and you'd think it would be straightforward. But Joaquin's crucial miss wasn't retaken, even though Korea's keeper was visibly off his line. Just like that, Spain was out. Hierro later said they'd all expected it after what happened to Italy and Portugal. Newspapers jumped on it, putting out their most biting headlines. FIFA even had to respond, with Sepp Blatter brushing it all off as coincidence and exceptional circumstances. Finally, Korea met Germany in the semi-finals, where the game proceeded more predictably, with Ballack's goal knocking Korea out. The third-place match against Turkey? It was the battle of the underdogs. Turkey scored just 10 seconds in, and by the end, they secured the bronze. Korea was knocked out. Despite the drama, Korea still had plenty to celebrate. Their captain Myungbo won the bronze ball, and two of their players made it into the tournament's best exam, the first and only Asian players ever to achieve that honor. Korea celebrated as if it were a miracle. Coach Gus Hiddink became a national hero, earning honorary citizenship and a luxurious villa in the process. But here's the kicker. After the World Cup, more controversies surfaced. French players from a friendly match just before the tournament openly claimed they suspected Korea of doping. Frank Leboeuf remarked, "They seemed superhuman out there, faster than lightning." And where were these players after the World Cup? Nowhere. They vanished. And now I know what you are asking. What about the referees? Oh, they didn't exactly thrive post-tournament. Byron Moreno, the infamous ref from the Italy game, became notorious for his self-defense, claiming Italians were the real, corrupt ones. His career spiraled downwards as he kept up his chaotic officiating, eventually leading to a suspension. And then came the knockout blow. He was caught in New York with 13 pounds of heroin strapped to his waist, earning him a prison sentence of 2.5 years. Buffon, the Italian goalkeeper, later joked, "The drugs don't surprise me." He was carrying something in 2002 too, only it was in his stomach back then. As for Al-Gandour, the referee for the Spain match, rumours circulated that he received a new car, possibly a thank you from FIFA's Korean vice president. Though he denied the allegations, he suddenly retired despite an otherwise spotless career. And here we are, 2 decades later, still talking about it. Ever since, no Asian team has gone beyond the round of 16. And that, my friends, was the wild story of the 2002 World Cup. Thanks for joining, and until next time.